Yes.
I'm going to call it. All right, I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Governing Board. The time is now 7:20, so we are running a few minutes behind. We'll go ahead and get started. Let the record show all board members are present. I need a motion to adopt the agenda.
I move we adopt the agenda and move item 6D after item 2, reports, and before item 3, public comments, and also remove items J and K from the consent agenda for separate consideration.
And I'll just interject, I apologize, I skipped the Pledge of Allegiance, so since we are adopting the agenda, is it okay to? Okay, so we'll go ahead and finish that thought and then do the pledge.
I apologize. Can you repeat the 2 items to be removed for separate consideration?
Items J and K.
I'll second it if it hasn't already been.
And then also moving item 6D to...
I already did that.
Okay.
Between items 2 and 3.
And we seconded it.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor in a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, hearing none, the agenda is adopted 5-0. Now will you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you very much. Let's go ahead and start with governing board reports. Ms. Tweedy.
No report.
Thank you. Mrs. Fisher.
I'm going to go with no report as well, just to honor the time.
Expedite time. Mrs. O'Brien.
Quickly, I would like to say that I was able to attend the 2nd annual DV Summer Tech Fest, which was awesome. I only attended a couple of sessions, but the opening session with Rachel Mann and then her next session, which I don't remember the name, but it was very good. And then I got to go back and experience the using social media to promote DVUSD, aka use Twitter, by Dr. Finch and Mrs. Allred, which was also wonderful, and got to meet some teachers in there and do some tweeting with them. So it was a lot of fun. It looked like from all the tweeting that everybody had a good time at the 3-day festival, or Tech Fest. And then in addition, I was able to attend the National Association for Latino Elected and Appointed Officials last week. It was really an incredible, it was their 35th annual conference that was held here in Phoenix, Arizona. They had different tracks: education, criminal justice, as well as stuff about cities. And so we got to hear from Dr. Crow and talk about what we need to do to advance education, or what kinds of things. There was a panel, and it was really phenomenal. So as well as getting to hear about some great educational things, it was interesting to sit in some criminal justice sessions as well, because what we do in education or aren't able to do may affect the criminal justice system. And I don't know about you all, but I'd like to quit paying for the prisons and start paying more for education. So it was really nice to get some insight from all those and make some great connections at that conference. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. O'Brien. Mrs. Ordway.
Oh, let's see. We just have a Music Rocks performance. That was awesome. There was probably 200 parents there, so that was nice, and that was beginners to high school kids. I also heard about the Tech Fest but wasn't able to go, so I did make a request that perhaps we could get the PowerPoint, and I think we've already gotten it. So we'll be tweeting the board meeting out after it's over. Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you. So I would like to thank my fellow board members for carrying on in my absence. I was not present at the previous board meeting due to a planned vacation trip to Japan, which was very exciting. Fortunately, we planned our travel correctly, and we arrived back in the States about a day and a half before the earthquake in Osaka, missing that. I did hear that the meeting went very smoothly. There was no arguing. Everyone got along very well. I'll be more than happy to sacrifice and go back to Japan again to facilitate better board meetings in the future. And that's the end of my report. Dr. Finch, it's your turn.
All right, thank you. I understand there was a lot of cats in Japan, and there was
On Cat Island, yes.
Cat Island. I'm kind of a cat guy, so I got to check it out. Two bits of information. One is construction. I think I've updated you in the Thursday updates, but just a reminder that we have Barry Goldwater. That restaurant is making progress, and also at Arrowhead Elementary, we are on schedule as well for that update. So that's nice to see that it's going well so far, but as you know, construction always has curveballs in it, so we're waiting for those. We seem to be, Jim has crossed both fingers and toes, and we seem to be on schedule. The last bit of information is I wandered in today to Suzuko. They're practicing at O'Connor High School, and that's coming up in a week, so be following Twitter, and you can find out how to sneak in and watch that. That's a summer camp musical that's going on, so obviously the Dr. Seuss theme, which is always a hit with educators. So watch Twitter and or email me, and I can find out when those sessions are going, and you can come check it out. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Finch. So we did move action item 6D, approve the recommendation for the principal of Sierra Verde up on our agenda. So can I get a motion?
I move that the governing board approve the principal recommendation for Sierra Verde.
Are you going to say his name?
Well, this is my
Tony
part.
Gaglietti. Did I get that right?
Second.
Did I pronounce his name correctly? That'd be embarrassing if I
Yep.
didn't.
If
Second.
you could stand in the back there, we have Tony Galletti from. Whoa.
You probably should vote, right?
We haven't approved yet. It could be a 3-2 vote. So
You might
Wanna
have
hold
to
your
clap
applause.
again.
Or applaud louder after the vote.
Yeah.
So do I have a second now that we have a name?
Second.
Okay. So Dr. Finch.
Tony comes from us previously from Arizona, from Fountain Hills, and then had a 3-year adventure over in Abu Dhabi. So I met him several times via the internet, and then finally great to see his whites of his eyes today. He's been in Arizona, back in Arizona for a week. So welcome to the Deer Valley family.
Does he follow your Twitter account?
He will by the end of the meeting.
Okay.
Dr. Finch, DVUSD.
All right. Are there any other questions, comments? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Motion carries 5-0. Now you may applaud even louder.
Nice. Now
Okay.
you can go out in the lobby and meet each other. That'd be working good. You don't have to stick the whole time. So.
But don't talk too loud, okay?
Delbro.
All right. Welcome to Deer Valley. Okay, so that brings us to item 3, which is public comments. We have one speaker, Mr. Paul Strauss. If you will please step forward to the podium and prepare to be admonished.
The board invites public comment on the district's business in general and on any agenda item in specific. All speakers must observe the rules of decorum. Speakers must fill out a card listing name, address, and topic and hand it to the board secretary prior to the president calling the meeting to order. Speakers must make their comments in no more than 3 minutes. If necessary to accommodate all speakers within a 30-minute overall limit, the board president may shorten each speaker's time. Constructive criticism is in order. Rudeness, vulgarity, disruptive conduct, or remarks disrespecting personal dignity are not in order and will not be allowed. Under the Arizona Open Meeting Law, the governing board cannot discuss or act on any items not listed on the agenda. Board members may respond to criticism made by a speaker, ask a staff to review a matter, or ask that a matter be put on a future agenda.
Please state your name for the record.
My name is Paul Strauss, and I am an 8th grade science teacher at Sunset Ridge. And just want to bring up a point that I'd like the board to consider in the future is with the full-time position of assistant principals at K-8 schools. that I know that it was one of those things from a budgetary standpoint with NST that they decided to, that there would be some K-8 schools that would go back to being .5s. I take a little personal because my school is one of those. And I would just like to see, from just a developmental standpoint, the importance of having full-time assistant principals at K-8s. We are dealing with environments with developmental 4-year-olds all the way up to 14-year-olds, which can be developmental on their own. And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And I've been in the experience of having .5 AP, and campuses do run. But at that point, we're just looking at just keeping our heads above water and just operating and not exceeding. When we do have full-time APs, we are in an environment where we can do more professional development, development of for the teachers and what is best for the students. So this is something that I'm hoping that we can go forward as a priority for schools, that we can actually look at full-time assistant principals. That's all I'd say.
Thanks, Paul, for the information. The NST is the one that works on that, on the proposal, and Jen is not here at the moment to explain the latest update, but that is something that was obviously arm wrestled with in the session. So I can't comment on specifics of the proposal, but that is definitely something we are considering and something that's important, as you suggested. So don't disagree with you. Correct.
Okay. And thank you, Dr. Finch, for providing that clarification. Okay, so we will move on to old business, and Dr. Galligan. So we have several intervention items all listed separately. We'll begin. Oh, yes, we do need a motion. Thank you, Ms. Tweedy.
Okay. I move that the governing board approve the administration's recommendation to purchase Dreambox as Tier 2, Tier 3 math intervention and extension for students in grades K-8.
Second. Okay, Dr. Galligan.
President Frank, members of the board, Dr. Finch. Just a couple of additional comments on this particular intervention. This past year, we reviewed 10 different resources looking specifically for math at K-8. We narrowed those down to 3, which were Dreambox, iReady, and Imagine Learning. We visited 2 school districts, Alhambra and Cave Creek specifically. Alhambra to look at iReady in action, and Cave Creek to look at Dreambox in action. We did observations, we talked with students, we talked with teachers. Based on that data and then the other research that we had done, that's how we narrowed it down to Dreambox as the Tier 2, Tier 3 intervention resource we would like to move forward with. Dreambox has unlimited staff and student use in the classroom and at home. It's 24/7 use. It is going to be utilized in both Tier 2 and Tier 3, as well as extension for students who have already mastered content. They'll be able to utilize it in a different way. We have parent notifications and milestones that are built into that particular resource, so parents are kept informed on their child's intervention work. All K-8 teachers who teach math and all K-8 students would be impacted by this intervention resource. There would be no additional staffing required. It would be our current staffing that would be able to utilize it. There would be no cost to campuses. The PD support that would be involved would be 2 days of customized kickoff training. It could be either in person or through an online interface. There would be 60 minutes of customized training per campus. Now, we have had some campuses who piloted this particular resource, as well as 2 campuses who had already purchased it on their own prior to us making a recommendation for Dreambox. There is Dreambox Online, so it has customer service that's built in, support for teachers and parents. And then there's a data review sessions and quarterly data checks that could be built in or would be built in as far as the supporting our teachers in their utilization of this as an intervention resource. I believe those were the types of questions you had the last time for each of these 3 interventions, so I wanted to provide that for you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Galligan. Are there further questions from board members? Okay, so just to clarify quickly, you mentioned there's no site licenses, so unlike a program like Read 180, we're not limited to the number of students who could use this intervention by cost of site licenses. Am I understanding that correctly?
President Frank, the way we have worked with Dreambox is all of our K-6 and K-8 schools, all kids and all teachers would have access to it during the day, during the school day, and outside of the school day.
Okay. All right, thank you for that clarification. Hearing no further questions and comments, then I will call for the vote on this item. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries 5-0. So we will move on to 4B, Intervention Resources Act now. Can I get a motion?
I move that the governing board approve the administration's recommendation to purchase Act Now as an English language arts intervention to access complex text for students in grades 4 through 6.
Second.
Dr. Galligan.
President Frank, members of the board, Dr. Finch, 4th through 6th grade Tier 2 students would be utilizing this resource. That would impact approximately 90 to 180 teachers, just depending on the students who had been identified. We determined that based on that, anywhere from 1,800 to 3,600 students across our district could be positively impacted by this. Vendor training could be provided in the fall. Our CIS coaches would support any requests specific to additional training. Again, a couple of our campuses had already purchased this in this past year as a resource that they were using. We would just encompass them as well. There would be no additional staffing incurred and no additional cost to campuses.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Galligan. Ms. Tweedy, do you have a question?
Is this an intervention that's required daily, and for what's the length of time?
President Frank, Ms. Tweedy, as a Tier 2 intervention, each campus has made some decisions on how they've broken their either 30 minutes or 45 minutes a day, whether children have been identified for math or writing or reading. It would just depend on each campus how they would utilize it, but it would be specifically for children who have deficits in comprehension and the ability to take information from text and write about it.
Okay.
So it could be anywhere from 2 days to 5 days, depending on each campus. This would be a campus decision.
So they're going to have they're still going to have at each campus a 60-minute regular reading block or a 45-minute regular reading block, and then this on top of it?
President Frank, Ms. Tweedy, 4th through 6th grade, we have the instructional minutes is 60 minutes for reading.
Okay.
So on top of that would be this as an intervention for those students who need that additional support for close reading of text, as well as transferring that information from close reading of that text into written language.
And I'm sorry, Dr. Galligan, thanks for answering this. I realize I should have sent this ahead of time. I just, with everything. I guess what I'm just trying to figure out, so do we have an intervention block? I'm just trying to figure out how many hours we have in a day, and then they can choose the students who either need a math or a reading intervention. I'm just trying to figure out how people would have time to do their reading block, their math block, their Dreambox block, and then this block, like just hours in a day to do it.
President Frank, Ms. Tweedy, we have actually, we provide each of our campuses with required instructional minutes, and there are some choices involved in that, specifically that in primary grades, you will have 90 minutes of reading. That doesn't include writing. Writing is on top of that, and then there is a 30 to 45-minute intervention that's built on top of that. When we look at our instructional minutes, it's pretty much laid out really tight for our campuses, and we've made that transition over the last 3 years to this upcoming year where every campus will have intervention time built in K-6 over and above the required instructional minutes for their core content areas. And I'd be happy to have you take a look at the master schedules and how they've been built by our campuses so that you can see how they've built that time in.
Oh, no, that's fine. I was just thinking you would either do math or reading. I just was trying to figure out how you would have an extra 45 minutes of reading and math on top of your normal block. Thanks.
You're welcome.
No, that's a great question. If I might add here, she just skipped over that very nicely. That was a ton of work, trying to get all of the schools to follow some structure on exactly what you're talking about. Because what happens is teachers have favorites. I know, I've been there. You have favorites in this area. You tend to put more of your energy in there. So now we're actually providing structure around it, and I think we're on the right path. So that's a very good question, and that's something that took a long time to work on and with the principals and the different teams. So kudos to Dr. Galligan as well to realize that that's important.
Okay. Are there further questions? Then I will call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries 5-0. Old business 4C, the Intervention Resources SIPs. Can I get a motion?
I move that the governing board approve the administration's recommendation to purchase SIPs, a reading fluency and comprehension intervention for students in grades K-6.
Second.
Dr. Galligan.
President Frank, members of the board, Dr. Finch. This one is a little bit different as it is a kit that would be checked out. It would be utilized with kindergarten through 6th grade teachers who the school has identified a need. It would impact approximately 10 teachers at a time. So the kit was checked out. 10 teachers could utilize it for whatever period of time they needed it. It would be returned, and then the next group could check it out should they want to. 30 to 50 students would be positively impacted through that particular intervention. And we would utilize this intervention when we've identified the other interventions are not working for children, and that's why it would be really a finite look, a really focused, intense look for children in kindergarten through 6th grade. Vendor training would occur in the fall with CIS coaching support. There would be no additional staffing incurred and no additional cost to campuses.
So this sounds like it's a more intensive intervention for students that haven't been successful with other interventions.
Exactly.
And we want to still have something for
in our
them.
toolbox.
Another
Exactly.
toolbox for them. Okay. So would the 10 teachers all need to be clustered at one campus? When you say it's a kit, is it one kit and it would be school by school?
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct. And truly, we have so many interventions that are for our primary grades for that literacy and reading skills. This would more than likely be utilized more at the 4-6 level, but it is broad. It works at kindergarten through 6th
And that's
grade.
a tough group because if they don't have those basic skills and they get up to 4th and 6th, it is difficult to find interventions for them. So one other question, if you don't mind. Who would determine or how would need be determined? If there's, say, 2 schools that said we really need this, how is it determined who gets it when?
President Frank, we would use data. So we would use our DIBELS data, we would use our Lexile level data, and we would use our AZ Merit data. So
Okay.
those 3 would give us a triangulation on this campus is in desperate need based on their data. Then we would go to the next campus, and then from there, the next campus.
Perfect, thank you. Ms. Tweedy, you have a question?
Yeah, on this one I do. So this one's not computerized.
No.
And are reading specialists going to be the people checking it out and using it with the students? Because they're going to need, I'm assuming, a teacher with this intervention.
It could, President Frank, Ms. Tweedy, it could very well be a reading specialist, but it could also be a gen ed teacher during intervention time who would be working with a small group of students. It could be where we cluster children, but it really is work with small groups, and that's typically our reading specialists.
If we adopt this, I would like to see if we review it in a year and see if the schools feel they have the person that they need. Because I know sometimes interventions like this don't get used because the teachers don't have the support, even an instructional assistant. And it is hard when you're trying to instruct 35 students to do an intervention on a small group that probably you probably have to follow a very scripted regimen, or it won't work, or the research won't be effective. So just to make sure we have the staff to do it.
Without a doubt. We'll bring that back.
Okay. Anything else? Then I will call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries 5-0. And 4D, which is to approve the revised certified and other professional staff salary schedule for FY19. Ms. Tweedy, can I get a motion?
I move that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation to approve the revised FY19 certified and other professional salary schedule.
Second.
Okay. So do we, Mr. Miglerino?
President Frank, members of the board, Dr. Finch, as we were directed from the June 12th meeting, we went back and looked at the counselor starting salary amount, and our recommendation is to increase that to $40,000. It would be less than a starting teacher pay with a master's degree, but it would be significantly more than was first proposed back on June 12th. And one of the differences is that the counselors are not eligible for classroom site fund money, and included in the starting teacher pay and all teacher pay is a base salary amount of over $4,200 of classroom site fund money. So this significantly increases that and also honors continuing counselors without any additional cost to the budget. So the recommendation is to increase the starting salary only on the other professional schedule for the counselors up to $40,000 for the beginning with the 2018-19 school year.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Miglerino. Are there questions? Okay, hearing none, I will call for the vote. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Miglerino. So we will move on to the consent agenda. Can I get a motion?
I move that the governing board approve the consent agenda with the exception of items J and K.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. So we will move on to the two items that were pulled, starting with item 5J, and I will need a motion. Uh, 5J, which is authorization to enter into additional cooperative contract purchases for fiscal year.
I move that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation to give the administration authorization to enter into the additional cooperative purchasing contracts for fiscal year 17-18.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a
Yeah.
second? Thank you, Mrs.
Aye.
This says 2017-18 for item J.
Right.
Yeah, K is 18-19. So we're on item J. Thank you for the second, Mrs. Ordway. Are there questions? Mrs. Fisher, go ahead.
I do. Three of these are increases in legal services, and one of them is in contracted special education services. I would really like an explanation for why we have such an increase in legal. Are we, just overall, I would like to know what is the area of concern? Because it just says executive cabinet. Is this due to special education? Is it due to a different area? The other concern I have is, and this board has not spoke about it, this board as a whole. The prior board expressed that three of us, then, I'm the only one left, had concerns about using Gus Rosenfeld for anything other than bond because they blatantly did something different than what the board had asked them to do. So why are we using them at such an extensive level? So those are my two main questions. And then what is well, I guess that's just the special education services. So the main one is the legal. What is the reasoning for such an increase?
If I may answer, and then you can jump in. If I can get that information beforehand, I could be ready for it, so we can put that information in a Thursday update for you to make sure we are correct. I know Jim can probably take a stab or a guess at it, but
I would like to have an idea of at least a reason. I mean, we have an idea of what's going on. We're having more lawsuits. We're having, we've had additional contracts. We're using them for other things. I mean, we should have at least a basic idea of what
yeah, we
activities
can get that
are
information
happening.
for you. Do you have any thoughts, Jim?
President Frank, members of the board, Dr. Finch. So we have, just due to prior feedback from the board, we have been trying to not bring escalated amounts to the governing board when it comes to these blanket approvals. And so there are a number of increases here, all three of them legal services, and I don't know, I don't want to characterize it as not being significant, but it's because we're not increasing the amount, or initially we're trying to be very conservative with those estimates so that if there are some other changes, the board would then get another opportunity to at least offer their input for the increase that we would have to request, much like is happening right now. My suggestion would be for the legal services, we do break that down between the different various functions of the district, and we can provide that report to the board for the expenses, because most of these, since they are for the 17-18 year, the expenses have already been incurred.
Correct, and that's why I would like to know what they are, why such an increase.
I have a question.
Okay.
Yeah, for you.
Ms. Tweedy?
Is there an increase in our attorney's rates, or is there settlements in that amount that's that increase? Is that due to legal settlements, or is it due to an increase in attorney's hours than what we thought, or did the attorney's rates go up?
President Frank, Ms. Tweedy, so the rates are established usually on an annualized basis, and there are typically annual escalators in those hourly rates. So that's probably not the increase that we're seeing here, because these were established at the beginning of this fiscal year. So back in June, a year ago, of 2017, we would have established these amounts, and now we're increasing them because we don't have enough authorization from the governing board to handle the expenses as we've seen them come in. And it's more likely for that to happen at the end of the fiscal year than it would be in the middle of the fiscal year, right? Because we have more time to use those services. So again, because we were more conservative with the estimates, we're seeing more utilization of the attorney services. I don't believe that there are any settlements in the increases because the increases are relatively small.
If I'm understanding correctly, if the work from the attorneys, the legal work has already been done. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And so to adequately compensate for the work that was done, we need to increase the amount because it was over and above what was originally approved. Am I understanding that correctly?
That is correct, President Frank.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, we have to pay the bills. I was just questioning as to why.
I guess
And
from,
why the increases, but.
well, then I guess from my own knowledge, if you're going to put that in an update too, I would like to see a comparison of the legal fees we paid for 17-18 and the previous year, like side by side. And if, I mean, I don't know how you get it because I don't want to make people pull copies and manually add, but I want to know if maybe it's like an increase in attorney time or just the fees or settlements, if it's broken out into different accounts, if we could have a comparison of that.
It would be helpful to have some trends.
We can do that.
on what's going on with that.
Thank you.
Mrs. O'Brien, questions?
More of a clarification in reference to Mrs. Fisher's comment about the board vote several years ago regarding one of the legal services on here. At that time, the board vote was also to allow those attorneys to continue working on any cases so that we didn't lose continuity and increase any legal fees. So I think that's an important point of clarification. And I would appreciate, like my fellow board members, the additional information on our legal fees without it creating too much additional work.
Yeah,
Thank
Ms.
you.
O'Brien is correct. We did agree that we would, anything that was, and I think we actually have it, just to remind the board, Dr. Weitenheimer did provide us a list of currently active cases in VIBE. So that information of the existing cases should already be in there. If that's what this is, that would be a acceptable statement. I just want to be aware of what these are.
And President
Well, I
Frank,
just want to add one more thing, perhaps, since we're on this and we're
Go
getting
ahead,
ready
Mrs.
to,
Ordway.
to do 1819. I'm not making your mistake. 1819, maybe we should go over the law firms that we're going to utilize, period. Just get a refresher on them,
Okay.
an agenda.
For agenda
And a
item.
future agenda. Okay, thank
Absolutely.
you. So thank you, Mrs. Fisher and Mrs. O'Brien, for providing the historical context.
And
And-
I just want to concur with her because I know that our board protocols say that we need 2 people to request an agenda item. So I want to
Okay.
add my support for that.
Okay, so have you made a note of that, Dr. Finch?
Yes.
Thank you. So we will honor that agreed upon board process and make sure that appears on a future agenda. If there's no other discussion on this item, then I will call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries 5-0. So that moves us to item 5K.
I move that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation to give the administration authorization to enter into cooperative purchasing contracts for fiscal year 1819.
Second.
Okay, so Mrs. Fisher, did you have some questions on this item?
Well, again, this goes into the same thing where we approved last year at a lower amount. Now we're approving at the higher amount for this coming year. So are we projecting, and same thing, I'm looking at legal, all legal, but then specifically also Gus Rosenfeld, as to the reason for $60,000. Are we expecting bond work? Are we going to be going, do we have a pending sale of bond? Do we have, and then current cases, do we know what that amount is? Or why are we approving at a much higher amount this year than last?
President Frank, Ms. Fisher, yes, there were, in my understanding of our utilization of Gus Rosenfeld were twofold. One, for continuing cases, and second, because there are only essentially, you can argue maybe 3 attorneys in the state that do bond work. We have historically used Mr. Jim Giel and Mr. Scott Ruby at Gus Rosenfeld for our bond work, and have for literally decades. So we continue to use their services, and we have annual bond sales scheduled. The increases are, again, based on what we experienced in the most recent year, 2017-18, along with any escalation that might be in their proposals.
So this could be their increased rates?
It would be, it would be
Not
enough.
just theirs, but all attorneys?
That is correct.
Okay. I would like to have an idea when you add to that agenda item, because I do think it's something that we need to talk about. This board may feel completely differently. I may be the only one that's concerned about having an attorney that does not listen to the board. But when we have that discussion, I would like to know at least the timeframes, because we did have a legal RFP. I believe it went up 3 years ago. I think it was 3 years, and I know procurement rules have somewhat changed. We had the 5-year. I know we changed the cycle for audit firms, so I would like to know where we're at in the cycle for our legal, and where we're at when that item comes forward. That would be really helpful.
Okay, is there any further discussion on this item? Ms. Tweedy?
Just for the future, and maybe so we could have efficient or less questions on legal items, I would just request that if our attorney fees are increasing due to any settlements of any sorts, that it not be placed on the consent agenda, so it's not necessary to pull off and question for that reason, that it would be always a separate consideration item if we're increasing attorney's fees. due to a legal action that the board doesn't know about, then it wouldn't be on the consent agenda because it wouldn't be a routine matter.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Tweedy. If there's no further discussion, I will call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries 5-0. All right, so that moves us to action item 6A, which is to approve employee travel. I know that historically we have done it trip by trip. I would recommend we could approve it as a whole due to the delay in time on the meeting and in the interest of honoring and respecting everyone's time. However, if there's someone who feels strongly about voting each trip as a separate item, then I'm fine with that as well. So I guess I would like some feedback from my fellow board members as how they would like to proceed with this item.
I like the package deal.
Thank you, Mrs. Ordway. Mrs. O'Brien's nodding her head. Mrs. Fisher?
There's nothing here that shows to be an excessive item. I'm fine with the package.
I move that the governing board approve all employees out-of-state travel per governing policy GCCE.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 And any opposed? Okay, motion carries 5-0. Action item 6B, addenda pre-approvals. I will need a motion.
I recommend that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation to pre-approve the addenda as presented.
Second.
Okay, is there a discussion on this item? I think that's a long enough dramatic pause, so I will call for the vote.
Aye.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 I move that the governing board accept the administration's.
Wait, motion carries 5-0. I didn't hear any nays. All right.
I move that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation to approve the advertising of fiscal year 19 proposed expenditure budget.
Second.
This is where I really want to ask Mr. Miglerino to do the presentation again, but I won't. All right, so we have a motion on the floor in a second.
Do we really have to advertise? No, I'm just kidding. I know we do.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I will call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? So the motion carries 5-0. We have already taken care of action item 6D, so we are moving right along to item 6E, an intergovernmental agreement.
I recommend that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation to approve the revised intergovernmental agreement between Deer Valley Unified School District and the Governor's Office for Project Momentum Program for fiscal year 2018-19.
Second.
Okay, so Dr. Finch or Mr. Miglerino, if you would like to, is there information that you would like to present to the board in advance of the vote?
President Frank, members of the board, Dr. Finch, just briefly, unfortunately, we received what we learned after the fact was a draft of the intergovernmental agreement, and later learned from the governor's office, since this grant is sponsored by them, that they wanted to, that was a contextual document. They actually worked on the actual document after the board already approved it. So we provided a marked up version of the changes. It looks significant, but there aren't any major changes in terms of our responsibilities or the responsibilities of the governor's office. It's just that the formatting is different, so when it does the comparison of the two documents, it looks much more involved than it actually is. But the governor's office is requiring us to approve this form because it has some specific references in it that aren't included in the IGA that was previously approved.
So the moral of this story is not proofreading your paper before you turn it in will get you every time.
Or having excitement. You get too excited and
I think the early
Perhaps.
bird getting the worm didn't do us any favors because we were excited about putting this together and did not realize that it was not clear to us that they were sending us a contextual document, not the actual document.
Okay. So I know we've all seen the document that was provided to us, so are there any further questions regarding this item? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 I'm going to abstain because it's anonymous donor, so I wouldn't know what I was voting for.
Okay, so the motion carries with 4 ayes and 1 abstention and brings us,
4-0.
oh, okay, 4-0.
01.
1 abstention.
1.
Thank you for the correction. Item 6F, another intergovernmental agreement. Hopefully this organization proofread their stuff before they send it to us.
I move.
Yeah, hopefully.
Well, I don't know, some of their employees.
Okay, can I get a motion?
I move that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation to approve the intergovernmental agreement between Deer Valley Unified School District and the Maricopa County Air Quality Department for fiscal year 17 State Clean Diesel Program Subaward.
Second.
All right, so Mr. Miglerino, is there information you'd like to provide on this?
President Frank, members of the board, Dr. Finch, just some recognition for our transportation staff who actually wrote the grant, and special recognition to Maricopa County for helping us and assisting us with submitting this. We not only have, this is a fiscal year 17 award, federal fiscal year 17 award, but we also have a fiscal year 18 application that is still pending. But this is going to allow us to take our bond dollars and stretch them even further. The replacement bus schedule that we have that's funded from the bond. And so 25% of the cost of just over $1 million in replacement buses is going to be funded from this grant, pending the outcome of the vote on the IGA.
Okay. Any questions? Okay, hearing none. I think I can call for the vote as long as I abstain. So I will call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. I will abstain since I work for the department, Air Quality Department. That would be a conflict of interest. So it motion carries, 4 ayes, 4-0, 1 abstention. All right, so we are moving on to our preview items. Item 7A, the Computer Science Curriculum Framework. So that will be Dr. Galligan, and I see she has a posse with her to present.
President Frank, members of the board, Dr. Finch, and guests, this evening we bring you an update on our efforts with computer science education this past year and a preview of our recommendation for a pre-K-12 computer science framework. Jamie Fitzpatrick, Michelle Coots, and Kathy Borgeson will present information about this work and address one of the board requests from last summer that was to have our schools complete a needs assessment for computer science education on their campus.
President Frank, Governing Board members, and Dr. Finch, good evening. Tonight, we bring to you an overview of the work of the DVUSD Computer Science Education Committee with a focus on the 2017-2018 accomplishments and the committee's recommendation to adopt the Code.org curriculum for implementation of computer science education across all grade levels. The Computer Science Education Committee work in 2017-18 included the addition of many new DVUSD campus and community members, conducting a campus needs assessment, deploying a parent and student survey at pilot schools, observing and evaluating pilot resources at K-8 schools, and supporting the expansion of high school programs to all 5 campuses and the DV online learning program, and planning for continued implementation across all DVUSD schools through 2020 and beyond with professional development and support for teachers. The committee has refined the implementation plan to meet the varied needs of campuses, conserve district funds, and maintain fidelity in carrying out the components of the computer science framework. Initial schools represented at the inception of the CS Education Committee included Boulder Creek High School, Deer Valley High School, Desert Sky, Hillcrest, Sierra Verde, Mirage, and Legend Springs, along with business and industry representation from Apple, Cisco, and General Dynamics. Subsequent additions included Constitution, Canyon Springs, Las Brisas, Desert Mountain, and Honeywell. The expansion of the committee in subsequent years provided an ability to better conduct research, explore computer science delivery models, assess pilot resources, conduct survey, needs assessments, and plan for implementation in 17-18 and beyond.
President Frank, Governing Board members, and Dr. Finch, per the Governing Board's request, a needs assessment survey was administered to all campus administrators to gauge campus status, readiness, and interest in delivering computer science education on their campuses. Respondents were asked about if and how they were delivering computer science currently. All campuses indicated that they are currently offering or interested in offering computer science. They were also asked about their plans or preferences for delivery formats, funding and partnership, equipment needs, and staffing considerations. A comprehensive summary of the needs assessment was provided in a recent board update. Several computer science products were piloted this year. Computer Science Education Committee conducted observations of students and teachers using the materials and collected data. The data collected included delivery format and grade level, student groupings such as whole group, small group, and individual, student interaction such as computer-based or hands-on or an unplugged activity, student involvement ranging from mere compliance to high levels of excitement, teacher involvement, including looking whether the teacher was explicitly teaching students how to use the resource, monitoring and helping students with the resource, or using a hands-off approach. Each resource was also given an overall rating by each observation team. Overall ratings of the products range from 2.0 to 4.5 on a 5-point scale, with 5 being the rating representing outstanding. Parents and students of schools that piloted the computer science resources were surveyed to gather their input on the computer science education. About 70% of the parents who responded indicated that they feel their students have an interest in learning about computer science. Almost 95% of the parents reported that they want their children to learn computer science and believe that computer science education would be beneficial for their children regardless of their future career choices. About 69% of students reported they want to learn computer science, and 13% were still not sure if they are interested in learning about computer science or not yet. 60% of the students believe that learning computer science will help them in their future work. The most popular choice for when they want to learn computer science is during their regular classes.
President Frank, governing board members, and Dr. Finch, through the data gathered, a plan for implementation in DVUSD for 2018-19 was developed by the Computer Science Education Committee. The goals for delivery in DVUSD schools for the 2018-19 school year are specified by grade level. The recommendation for DVUSD's foundational curriculum resources for computer science are Code.org's courses which span the pre-K-12 grades. Code.org provides the leading curriculum for K-12 computer science in the largest school districts in the United States, and Code.org also organizes the annual Hour of Code campaign. All curriculum resources and tutorials authored by Code.org will forever be free to use and openly licensed under a Creative Commons license, allowing us to make derivative education resources. The technology utilized for delivery of Code.org curriculum is also open source. Code.org was launched in 2013 with the vision for quality computer science education available to every child. In addition to organizing the annual Hour of Code campaign, Code.org has prepared 72,000 teachers to teach computer science across grades K-12, and more than 28 million students are enrolled in their intro courses. For schools looking to build upon the foundational framework of Code.org's courses to provide students further opportunities, the Computer Science Education Committee identified additional resources for use within DVUSD schools. The Computer Science Education Committee evaluated and identified additional resources by grade band to supplement the computer science opportunities provided to students in DVUSD schools. The identified grade bands denote the grade levels of students who will be introduced to and utilize the specified resources. Extension resources are the top recommendations of resources to support computer science education. Optional campus add-on resources have also been identified from the pilot data and indicated by appropriateness for teaching computer science within grade bands identified for introduction of each resource, including both digital and physical resources. Through use of extension and add-on resources, students will have additional environments for learning computer science, including programming languages and hands-on devices for building problem-solving and computational thinking skills.
Code.org offers hands-on workshops and online support at no charge. Teachers can participate in a one-day computer science fundamentals workshop where Code.org provides a hands-on introduction to computer science pedagogy, teacher dashboard, and strategies for teaching classroom activities. Computer science discoveries and computer science principles teachers can participate in Code.org's professional learning programs, which kick off with a 5-day summer workshop, plus additional supports throughout the year. Additionally, teachers can personally try a course to learn ahead of students and set up a teacher account that will provide them with access to lesson plans, teacher forums, and resources. We have $15,000 allocated from our Title IV funding to cover the cost of subs for Code.org's training this fall. Professional development focused on the extension resources will also be provided using Title IV funding. Code.org's training will be provided in a variety of formats. Teachers who participate in Code.org training will receive a curriculum guidebook and a swag bag of very cool materials.
At the high school level, fall 2018 will see the rollout of the new CTE software and app design standards as approved by the Arizona Department of Education and validated by Business and Industry in January 2018. Current 4-year CTE program opportunities were offered at Boulder Creek High School and Deer Valley High School in 17-18. The full software and app design sequence spans 3 years with a senior year internship opportunity. A newly developed online course was developed and deployed in spring 18 through the Deer Valley Online Learning Program. Fiscal year 19 CTE federal grant goals include promoting equitable opportunities in software and app design across populations in an effort to bridge gender and socioeconomic gaps. As we plan for the implementation of computer science and DVUSD, we're making plans for alignment with the new standards for computer science, revision of the Computer Science Education Committee to best meet needs during the implementation phase, wrapping in new campuses, evaluating financial impact, and identifying staffing needs to fully implement and sustain the delivery of computer science education throughout our pre-K-12 system. In October 2017, ADE initiated the standards development process for K-12 computer science standards in Arizona. Working groups met periodically in January through May 2018 to review computer science standards from other states, explore the K-12 computer science framework, and to draft computer science standards by grade level for Arizona. Through the computer science framework, 5 computer science concepts have been identified and utilized in standards across states. From what we have seen, including the draft standards released yesterday by ADE, those concepts are prominent in the structure of ADE standards for computer science. Our DVUSD Computer Science Committee is staying attuned as the standards are rolled out for public review and subsequently presented to the State Board of Education for adoption and tentative implementation in 2019 and beyond. As our DVUSD committee enters its 4th year, the focus will be on program implementation and meeting the specific grade level needs. General meetings will be held in the fall and spring to keep all stakeholders up to date on current district and state level work. Members will be able to focus their efforts on grade band teams as listed here and will address needs, gaps, and efforts at each grade band level. The High School Advisory Council will utilize input and collaboration from business and industry professionals to drive delivery of program standards, provide quality work-based learning experiences for students, and prepare program completers for industry certification, entry-level employment, and post-secondary education.
Overall, the majority of elementary and middle schools have begun to integrate computer science education for students in their school or are well on their way to making computer science an integral part of the learning day. These 4 elementary schools, while not yet actively implementing computer science, each indicated that they are interested and know the expectations for next school year. And as you noted, we have 3 high schools who will be newly offering CTE courses for computer science. O'Connor will offer software and app design and will be the only campus at this point who will offer AP computer science principles. Mountain Ridge and Barry Goldwater, new for next year, will also offer software and app design together. For the 2018-19 school year, there will be no undue impact to the budget expected for implementation beyond some costs for teacher training, which we have Title IV funding, thankfully, that will cover that. As implementation expands into the 2019-20 school year, we will need to consider that there is sufficient staff to provide computer science and STEM to all students pre-K 6, which could present a need for additional staffing support. And we mentioned that last year when we gave you the 3 to 4 year implementation plan. This impact may be as little as $0 up to an estimated $80,000 for 1920. Projecting into 2021 school year, estimated costs would remain similar to 1920 school year with the exception of technology funding. In hopes of moving to a 1-to-1 device ratio for our middle school students, it could go upward to $200,000. This cost would be addressed through reallocation of technology and possibly through our bond funds. Funding components to enrich computer science experiences for students in pre-K-12 would include field trips, clubs, and competitions. The upper end of the amounts that I just shared with you represent makerspace options also for campuses. In fact, we just completed our curriculum work on makerspaces that campuses will be able to utilize should they want to next year. We will also continue to seek out outside grant funding as well. As mentioned at the beginning of this presentation and preview, we bring code.org as our computer science framework for your consideration, and we'll have it at the July 10th board meeting as an action item. We really tried to identify a framework that would be frugal but broad and also have a solid background in presenting and providing curriculum for children. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Galligan, and thank you for considering the financial implications with the recommendations. Very much appreciated. I do have a quick question on the extension resources for the add-ons for elementaries. How would schools obtain the funding for that? Is that something that would be, I assume maybe a site-based decision or grant money available to them, or how would that work?
President Frank, that would be one option for our schools that are way down that path. They have identified additional needs, and they would obviously reallocate some of their funding.
Okay.
We would also just identify if there is any additional funding that at the district level we could identify for them, as well as seeking out grants.
Okay, thank you. Questions or comments from other board members? Mrs. Ordway, you look like you have something you would like to say.
Put your microphone on, Ordway. What a great presentation, and I really appreciate how you guys really went out to the schools, looked at the options, and we are a year ahead of the projected ADE, whatever that was. Anyway, so we're going to be, we'll have our initial year, or some will have more than one because they've already been piloting it, but prior to the standards being rolled out, correct?
President Frank, Ms. Ordway, that is the plan, yes.
Yeah. And I don't think I haven't been on all the campuses during their computer science time, but I don't think I've been on a K-8 campus or a K-6 campus that hasn't been doing something with their computer science. So awesome work for DVUSD, and thanks for such a great presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Ordway. Other comments from fellow board members?
If I may add,
you're
on
getting a thumbs up?
my 500 visits, I've seen a lot of these robots in action. So just go back and look at my old Twitter account. You'll see all the robots in action.
All right. Thank you so much for presenting this information to the board. It's very much appreciated. That brings us to item 7B, preview negotiated tentative agreement for 2018-19, number 67, pending ratification by the employee associations. All right.
Welcome.
President Frank, members of the board, Dr. Finch, thank you for the opportunity to share the Negotiated Solutions Team tentative agreement preview. You have several documents, I believe, in preparation for this: the PowerPoint, the language that goes in the order that it's presented in our manuals, and an MOU that we'll talk about as we go through this. And first, we want to recognize those NST members who served on the certified language team. That would be Jenna Moffett, Mr. Segerson, Maria Leyva, Kelly Fisher, and Kim Crooks, as well as
Maria Leyva's here with you.
Thank you, as well as our classified NST members who worked on the language for the classified manual. I don't believe any of these people are here except for me.
Not here.
And we'll just progress through these. We begin with the certified negotiated agreement changes. The first one that you notice is in section 12, and it references job sharing and part-time teaching. In this change, the intent is to, for our part-time limited teachers who are in the same location and position for 3 consecutive years successfully, they would no longer have to be part-time limited after the completion of the 3rd year. We have a few certified staff members who serve in a part-time limited capacity. They've never achieved the continuing status by working full-time for the appropriate number of years, but they've served in that part-time limited capacity successfully year after year. What happens is their position has to be posted for reassignment and then posted for transfer, and because they're successful in what they're doing, the school really would like the opportunity, once they're successful, to be able to continue with them being continuing status after 3 years in the same spot. The next section is section 15 on class loads. This section just addresses the formulas both for speech and language and occupational therapy. In both cases, I believe this was based on research for potential need, as well as a refinement in continuing staffing levels.
And I believe Ms. Tweedy has a question. I know you probably have quite a few slides, so rather than having to backtrack.
I just wanted to, this is for me personally, and I didn't know if other board members would agree or not, so I just want to put it out there. I don't agree with this, and I wouldn't support this, because I think special ed staff and related service staff has to be a ratio of the students who actually need that service in some capacity as opposed to total students, because the number of total students at the school, if they don't receive speech therapy, should have nothing to do with how many speech therapists we staff a school with. So I would want that ratio to either be, and I would suggest discussing this with the people who deliver related services, either related to total IEP minutes delivered at that school for that service, or the total students who need that service, or the total number of groups that they have to provide at that school. I don't know which way makes more sense, because I'm not I've never taught special ed, but to talk to those people. But I do know that any staffing ratios related to special ed should be related to students who need those services, and that's the only thing I could support. So I don't know if my board members agree with me or not.
Can I weigh in on that? How did we come to that change?
President Frank, Mrs. Ordway, for the speech language percentage, we started with looking at the service loads at each campus. In both cases, I believe those employee groups are itinerant employees, so they're hired at the district level and assigned at the campuses. In the speech language conversation, the 7.5% comes from research that suggests in a population of students we would expect there's a range, but we settled on 7.5% of that population to receive services. That matches fairly closely what we see in service loads and student IEPs currently.
So who was the we? I'm just trying to figure out the backgrounds.
So these conversations were with special services, Ms. Moffett. I participated in speech language, and also the service coordinators, supervisors.
So there were people from special ed in on the conversations?
President Frank, Mrs. Ordway, yes, there were.
Okay, because I was wondering why it was changing from a ratio to percentage, but if it is our own people that are asking for it to change that way, I'm just trying to figure out what the pro is to change it from one to the other.
President Frank, Mrs. Ordway, yes, this came from a request in both areas to consider the staffing in this manner.
And it would make it better for students?
President Frank, Mrs. Ordway, yes, I believe that was the intent.
Okay, 'cause I'm just trying to figure that out, because I don't like to redo something that someone has done that has taken the time with the expertise to make it better for students, where maybe you could hit more students or fewer students in the case, because when you're a speech therapist and that you want less students to have to help. But so I would be reticent not to vote for it if I knew that the backgrounds of the people that were coming up with this new situation were the ones that came up with it, and it was to help students more than less.
President Frank, Mrs. Ordway, we can share a summary of how we arrived at these and the members on those teams in the board update.
That would help me out a lot.
I think there are some additional questions, and Mrs. Fisher had indicated she had a question, so I will allow her first.
Well, I believe that is kind of between the two. All of our point is to make sure that we're doing what's best for students. And to what Ms. Tweedy had said, we already were at a ratio. So what I was trying to clarify, the notes I wrote down, is it looked like prior it was school-wide based on an overall. And as Ms. Tweedy has so elegantly stated, some schools have a much larger percentage of special education students that will utilize these services. So I guess I'm trying to understand the language that was brought forward. 7.5% of total student population. What is that? You're just saying that is your estimate? Total population would require speech and language services, or are we going to do that based on actual students utilizing services? Because I think that would kind of assist in clarifying on what this was, because my notes were a little bit of confusion as well. If we are just doing an overall whole population at school A, and they have a minimal amount of speech specific, and then we have another school that has twice the level of speech required, and we're staffing them the same, I guess that is the point, I believe, is. But we need clarification on what that actually means.
If I may, it sounds like the clarification you're asking for is this a one-size-fits-all, everyone gets the same, or what about the outliers, those schools that have a higher speech-language population than others?
I believe that's what Ms. Tweedy had asked as well, and that's kind of what my notes were as well.
And the other thing is, yes, and to Ms. Fisher's point, you usually use predictors like 7.5% of a population when you don't actually have the data. We know how many IEP hours or minutes each school, and we do know they're not equal. I requested that information when I got on the board, and we know that even though we staff K-6 schools with the X number of SPED teachers, we know the service hours they're required to provide is drastically different from school to school to school. We also know not all speech students need the same services. Some have expressive language, receptive language. They will have different needs, require more minutes. So to say a percentage of a population, I mean, I don't understand how we could possibly staff SPED without considering the students who need SPED services.
So it sounds to me, since we're only on, slide 2 or 3, that what I'm hearing from the board, or the majority of the board, is that we need clarification from special education, perhaps, on how this was arrived at, and some clarification, because I do realize that the NST committee has worked very hard on the language, but I think we all want to make sure that everyone wants to make the best decisions. And so this is a question for several members of the board.
I just want to be clear that I I'm not requesting clarification. I'm requesting a revision so that we staff according to our special ed students' needs, and we're not basing it. I mean, I don't calculate the volume of my garage to figure out how much gas to put in my car. I look at my gas tank. You need to look at the students who need the services to create these ratios, so that's what I'm requesting.
Mrs. O'Brien, you look as if you have something you would like to add.
If I may. I first we have 20 slides to go to total for this preview, and so
understand.
I have a request that
Okay.
because it is a preview item, that maybe we could wait till we get through the presentation to ask questions, and since we have 2 more weeks, allow the admin or executive cabinet to
Sure.
provide
I guess my decision to allow the question to be asked is because it was a large number of slides. It might be more efficient than backtracking. I wonder if we want to let Mr. Attenborough get through his presentation, make notes of questions that we can then send to them, because it is a preview item,
Right.
rather than.
Right. I just, my point is we don't have to approve it tonight.
No,
and,
no,
and
I
so,
under-
and
I
I
understand
appreciate that
that.
you're trying to make sure everybody does get their questions and points. And to the actual point that we're talking on, I would like to see, because our employees requested this,
Right.
the
So,
research and why.
So is it acceptable to my fellow board members to view the entire presentation, make notes of questions, and send them to Dr. Finch?
Absolutely.
Is that acceptable? Okay. All right. Please continue.
Thank you. In section 17, there's a recommended change for the language for approval of substitute plans. This came to the team from Ms. Bushnell, and the team agreed. The current language has approval of substitute plans for a school at 90%, and just changing that to the 2/3 approval so that schools can approve their substitute plans in a timely manner. In section 18, for professional growth, there's a recommendation that we remove the limit of 18 credit hours that can be applied in a contract year for certified staff. In section 19, under employee fringe benefits, this is a change to our language about sick leave, specifically when a supervisor can request a physician's note. This language was changed to match ARS 23-373, or what was previously Proposition 206. So this language is very close to what's in statute when the supervisor has a concern about abuse of leave hours. Section 20, this is a change to the pay options, and that is due to both a change in law regarding the time that we have to process compensation, but also to ensure that the work is done prior to processing the compensation in that first bullet item. In the second bullet item, we are increasing the extra duty pay to match where minimum wage is headed, and in the final bullet item, we're changing the number of, or proposing to change the number of clubs from 10 to 2 to align with other grade levels and actual current practice. There's an MOU that you have a copy of, that the intent of the MOU is a change in the language to assure that teachers who take an unpaid leave of absence for the 2018-19 school year would be entitled to receive the same board-approved salary increase as certified staff that worked during the 2018-19 school year upon their return to work in the 2019-2020 school year. Because of the board-approved pay raise, teachers under current language who took a leave of absence greater than a semester next year would not be eligible for that raise when they returned. This would allow them to be eligible for that raise upon their return in the 1920 school year.
So that would decrease the likelihood that we'd have a big wide spread between the people who returned and the people who didn't take a leave, correct? Because this is a very unusual amount for people to be receiving for a pay raise.
President Frank, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
On our classified negotiated agreement changes, the first change is in section 9 and is around due process. Previous language did note that there was not a time frame and that due process was required. However, we added a new paragraph that makes it more explicit that separate from due process, we will meet with an employee to discuss the outcome of discipline investigation. A due process doesn't necessarily mean discipline, because there could be due process and we realize that there's no reason for discipline, but we're trying to make it really clear that due process happens separately from the discipline and prior to the discipline.
And we were doing so well on time, weren't we?
There we go.
Section 11 also changes the number of pay periods, as outlined in Section 20A, which is actually the very last slide. Additionally, it clarifies employees' fringe benefits, including leave and vacation days and leaves of absence. It's just this current practice clarified, making the language more clear. Section 11 also tried to clarify it was only 12-month employees that are entitled to receive vacation days. The way the language was phrased previously didn't make that entirely clear. Those employees in part-time positions receive prorated sick leave and holidays. Again, it was just a clarification or a change in language to make it more clear. In Section 15, under employee staffing, the word committee was changed to work team to match our current practice. In Section 17, we removed the exclusion for bus drivers, assistants, and food and nutrition workers. Previously, they were directed to report their absence to their supervisor. We're asking that everybody use the absence reporting system uniformly district-wide. Section 18 under staff development, again noted just the change to work teams by adding or work teams, noting that committees or work teams are not eligible for that. Paid leaves of absence in Section 19. This mirrors that section in the certified manual that aligns with ARS and the language from Proposition 206 regarding when we can ask for physician's note. In Section 20, salary compensation, this is outlining the pay periods different employee groups by calendar can select. This currently has to be revisited annually because of how long we're allowed to wait to compensate an employee, but also to ensure that the pay period calendar follows the work actually performed.
Okay. All right, so as agreed upon, if there are questions, we will. He was smart.
I know we're going to email questions, but since we have Ms. Leva here as well as Dr. Finch, something you just said, looking at this MOU, we're going to have these teachers come back and they will get the raise for this year. Well, what about the raise for next year? So are they going to come back and get the 12 and only the 12, or the 12 plus the year for the 15 for the additional? Because that would end up being, is it going to compound? That's not the way this reads. So I'm just putting it out there. You don't have to answer anything, but if you could look at that, because I would hate for us to come back and have something. I mean, I really appreciate the legal review. I know it's sometimes a pain that I ask for legal opinions, but I'm glad that we made the adjustments the lawyer recommended. But just as I'm reading, I'm not sure that we considered the 18, 19, and then as they come back in 19, 20, because if they only get the 18, 19, they come back 19, 20, and let's say that's another 5% as projected, then they're going to be 5% below. You see what I'm saying? So just, we need to look to make sure they're getting that compounded, not just the individual.
Yep.
Thank you.
Probably what isn't discussed, and we'll have to discuss this next year, is somebody that wants to take a 1920. So stay tuned for next year.
But I'm just concerned with a couple.
MOUs for 1 year.
What is it? Would you say we had 20 for right now?
Yeah, plus or
I'm
minus.
concerned with securing that
12, I think.
set, because this is our set of known, that we've already jumped down this rabbit hole. We need to make sure we appropriately protect them for both.
Yep.
So
I believe what
that's-
you were stating is correct, but we can double check.
Will you check on that for us, Dr. Finch?
Yeah.
Okay, and provide that information perhaps in the next update. Okay, so for those of you who hung on this long, I know you've been waiting for 7C, preview 2018-19 extracurricular tax credit and fee authorization. I'm going to assume that's Mr. Miglerino.
It is. President Frank, members of the board, Dr. Finch. Annually, we have the board consider any of the adopted fees that we have for the district. And the only change that we have for this year is an increase to the Deer Valley Online Learning Program. It's an increase from $150 per class to $175. The rest of the fees remain exactly the same. And there was a comparison done of other online courses in which warranted the increase.
Okay, and Ms. Tweedy has a question.
Can you please send us that comparison?
Yes, it will be sent to you. I didn't do the comparison. I believe it was in one of the updates, but we can get that information.
If I missed it, I'm sorry, but yeah, I want more information on that fee increase.
Additional questions? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Miglerino. So future meetings are posted, dates are posted, and can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, I adjourn the meeting at